So if you're just joining us, continuing that extraordinary breaking news, Joe Biden has dropped out of the US presidential race. President Joe Biden has dropped out. He will not be the Democratic nominee. He has endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. And really, I mean, for some people, this is no surprise, but this is just an extraordinary historic moment I want to bring you now. The man who is had a very well-timed flight, let's just say. Wyatt Sharp, our North American correspondent. Wyatt, well, good afternoon to you. It's good morning here. What a day! What a day! And it only happened a couple hours ago.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly a lot of people were anticipating that it wasn't going to happen, at least today, just because we were getting into the afternoon. You weren't necessarily seeing it occupied in the news cycle as much. President Biden's at his home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. He had been diagnosed with COVID, and so a lot of people kind of thought that they were trying to just brush it under the rug at least as best as they could, but certainly that does not appear to be the case. We know that President Biden, at least as early as yesterday, was telling some of his closest advisors that he was going to remain in the race, and so that kind of means that he did really make this decision just in these final hours. We know that White House staffers only became aware of the decision by President Biden to withdraw from the race, as well as campaign staffers, just a few moments before the statement was put out by President Biden. And of course, just a few moments after the statement was put out by President Biden, you had a post on Twitter, or on X rather, saying that he endorses his Vice President Kamala Harris. There had been some reporting that had not been verified that had suggested that perhaps the president would advocate for more of an open primary process and that he would not make an endorsement. But of course, that is not what we see here. There's not necessarily any indication to point towards the fact that the president does not want an open primary process, but certainly he is not making any kind of hesitations as to announcing who he believes would be best poised to be his replacement. And obviously that person is the candidate who he chose to be his vice president. He posted on Twitter, he said that the best decision he's made over the course of his presidency was choosing Kamala Harris, and that he believes that she will be able to advance forward the administration's accomplishments, what they've already been able to do in their first term, into a potential next 4 years.
Yeah, and I just want to repeat that full statement from Biden because, as we said, right, it only came through, um, as we said, just over an hour ago, Australian time. And again, it's still a bit unbelievable, right? I mean, I know I was predicting it, but it's still a real surprise. The statement said, he said, quote, "My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and focus all my energies as president on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as a party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as vice president, and it's the best decision I've made. Today I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala Harris to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." Um, Again, it just... I don't think it can be understated why, just the historicness of this, right? Because it's not just as if Lyndon B. Johnson and dropping out as the incumbent and not running for re-election. He's been forced out. He has been completely forced out, and apparently behind the scenes, Pelosi, Obama, Schumer have all been working him, and they're huge names. I mean, it was a real coup, and it was taking ages to happen. But Pelosi's evidently won in this.
Yeah, it's actually interesting too. Of course, Nancy Pelosi no longer the Speaker of the House, no longer the House Minority Leader. She's just a Congresswoman now from California, but she's very close to President Biden, a lot closer than many other members of Congress are. And so, a lot of people are saying, make no mistake, Nancy Pelosi still runs the Democratic Party, even if Hakeem Jeffries has the official position as the Democratic Party leader. It was interesting. I was having lunch with a couple of Democratic sources before as this news was breaking, and just the look on their faces when it was actually announced that President Biden was going to be withdrawing from the ticket. I'll tell you, they were in particular furious over this idea of an open primary process. A lot of people, particularly those close to President Biden, those who have been longtime supporters of the Biden-Harris ticket, they feel as if Kamala Harris is owed the opportunity to serve as the Democratic Party's nominee, because, of course, in any other circumstances, if it was not for the age concerns, we would not have this conversation. President Biden would be the nominee. So a lot of people feel as if some of these divisions right now within the party really are things that could have been prevented, and that Democrats have just kind of been doing it to themselves. And that's certainly kind of the messaging that's been echoed over the course of, the past few minutes here now, and some of the people that I've been speaking with.
Yeah, we also just got a statement from Barack Obama, who's addressed this for the first time. Of course, he was the president when Biden was vice president. He
Yeah.
basically propelled Biden here, and apparently he's been working behind the scenes against him. He says on his Medium, quote, Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me. Today, we've also been reminded again that he's a patriot of the highest order. He says that we will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, but I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. I believe Joe Biden's vision of a generous, prosperous, and united America provides opportunity for everyone and will be on display at the DNC in August. For now, Michelle and I want to express our love and gratitude to Joe and Jill. Regarding that next nominee, I mean, it can't be anyone else than Kamala Harris, right? He's endorsed her. This late, surely not.
Yeah, it's certainly because of the endorsement makes it a lot easier for Kamala Harris. There was Representative Lloyd Doggett just coming out moments ago. He was one of the first members of Congress, first Democratic member of Congress, to come out and openly call on President Biden to step down. He's advocating for an open convention process, in the sense of it would not just be kind of a coronation, so to speak, behind the vice president, and thus there would kind of be the opportunity for the likes of Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, you name it, to put their name forward. But I think a lot of people, those who are, within the Democratic Party, even some of those names that I mentioned, they almost in many cases care more about guaranteeing that a Democrat wins, even if it's not themselves, just based off of how much is at stake in this election for them. Of course, a lot of them are saying that this should be an election that they're able to win very easily. But of course, just given the situation at play right now and some of the concerns that a lot of Democrats have, it's not looking as if that's going to be the case.
Now, vice president talk. Who will Kamala Harris pick there? I imagine she's going to. Maybe I'm just reading into Twitter speculation too much. But I'll just quickly. Are we talking like Andy Bashir, Josh Shapiro? I would assume it's like some white male governor. To be honest, I can't think of anyone else she'd pick if we're wanting to actually win here.
Yeah, and just before I go to that, Leo, we are getting a statement from the Trump campaign just with some reaction to this news. It's the first official reaction. Of course, we've seen some statements as it relates to various kind of campaign advisors, but this is the first official statement from campaign managers Chris Lasvita and Susie Willis saying, quote, crooked Joe Biden is a complete fraud and a disgrace to our country, which let's just stop at that first line there. This is the news after President Biden has said that he is withdrawing, and they're still focusing on Joe Biden. From a political strategy standpoint, you would think they would want to turn all of their attention towards Kamala Harris. They go on to say Biden has left our borders wide open. Biden has taken our once great economy and ruined it. Biden has been so weak, pathetic, and incompetent as a leader that he allowed 13 American service members to be killed in Afghanistan. And then they try to make the connection back to Kamala Harris, saying, quote, and during this entire term, Kamala Harris, as well as every other Democrat in Washington, lot there other than criticizing the Biden record and trying to link that back to Kamala Harris, because, of course, she's been the vice president for the past 4 years. If we're looking, though, at what you were mentioning as it relates to vice presidents, certainly you did mention Josh Shapiro, you mentioned Andy Bashir, and I would just throw in Gavin Newsom as well. Those are probably the top three at this point. There are a couple of others, but it seems kind of hard to see a world right now where those three would not be at the top of the list. But of course, it's hard to talk about who the vice president is going to be when there's not even complete certainty as to who the presidential nominee is going to be.
It's extraordinary, unprecedented times, Wyatt. Thank you so much. We'll be covering this for a while with you. Cheers.
Thanks.
Wyatt Sharp there, our North American correspondent, reporting live from the US on, again, this extraordinary morning. If you are just joining us, Joe Biden has announced he will drop out of the US presidential race. He will not accept the Democratic nomination this August, and he has endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris to be his successor, and that will pretty much all likelihood put her as the nominee. It is 5:52 in the morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. This is an extraordinary breaking news situation that we are continuing to follow for you. An unprecedented situation, something we have, well, for most people's lifetimes, not seen before. And again, just the way it's happened, the fact he's been pushed out. And of course, a lot of people saying, no, it won't happen, it's too late. I mean, I kept the receipts. I know what you guys told me. I know that you said it was never going to happen. So I just want to remind you that bookmarks exist. But really, it has just been an extraordinary morning, and we're going to continue to learn a lot more here. Now, Biden says he's going to address the nation, the US, later in the week. So, unfortunately for us, that kind of, well, it delays things here. But it is just, you know, a matter of well, we're not hearing from him, which is annoying. But still, we're just seeing what will occur here. Now, we're going to try to bring up a live shot of Washington, D.C., but where all the action is. But, yeah, again, just an extraordinary scene. And look, we will see the ongoing fallout here. Just so much has happened. So much has happened overnight. Of course, this broke probably in the worst possible hours for Australians, which, you know, that's annoying. That was really annoying. So, you know, but thankfully we've got a dedicated team of people who don't sleep. So, props to Maggie Perry who was on the Twitter account, and yeah, it has been a bit hectic for us. But yeah, if you're again just joining us, Joe Biden dropping out of the US presidential race to the surprise of, well, not many really. And yeah, you are looking at a live shot of, well, I think we're going to go to, yeah, there we go, Washington, D.C. You are looking at a live shot right there of Washington, D.C., of the White House, which Joe Biden has dropped out. I'm Leo Puglisi in the Six Newsroom. We are continuing our coverage all day. Trust me, all day. I'll try and get off from school. But yeah, an extraordinary morning here, and it's going to keep getting more extraordinary, I am sure. Stay with us. If you're also just joining us, we just got a statement from Vice President Kamala Harris. She says, quote, "On behalf of the American people, I thank Joe Biden for his extraordinary leadership as President of the United States and for his decades of service to our country. His remarkable legacy of accomplishment is unmatched in modern American history, surpassing the legacy of many presidents who have served 2 terms in office." Quote, "It is a profound honour to serve as his Vice President, and I am deeply grateful to the President, Dr. Biden, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden family. I first came to know President Biden through his son, Beau. We were friends from our days working together as Attorneys General of our home states. As we worked together, Beau would tell me stories about his dad, the kind of father and the kind of man he was." Beau Biden, of course, Attorney General of Delaware, I think, yeah. And the qualities Beau reviewed, the statement continues, "In his father are the same qualities, the same values I have seen every day in Joe's leadership as president. His honesty and integrity, his big heart and commitment to his faith and his family, and his love of our country and the American people. With this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. I am honoured to have the President's endorsement, and my intention is to earn or win the nomination. Over the past year, I have travelled across the country talking with Americans about the clear choice in this momentous election, and that is what I will continue to do in the days and weeks ahead. I will do everything in my power to unite the Democratic Party and unite our nation to defeat Donald Trump and his Extreme Project 2025 agenda. We have 107 days till Election Day. Together we will win, and together we will fight, and together we will win." Kamala Harris just released that statement. Noticeable also in the Biden, Barack Obama statement, he didn't endorse anyone. He didn't endorse Kamala Harris. I think he said that the DNC had full faith in the party to do something, but he didn't explicitly endorse Harris. So read into that what you will, right? But yes, stay with us. We're continuing this again. You just heard that statement from Kamala Harris after Joe Biden dropped out. 6:06 a.m. You're still with us here on Six News, continuing, of course, that major breaking news. If you're just joining us, it's 6:20 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard, and Joe Biden has dropped out of the US presidential race. I want to bring in now our elections reporter, Maggie Perry. Maggie, good morning. Look, for some of us, maybe me, maybe I'm being a bit smug here after everyone and their mother telling me it wouldn't happen, but not much of a surprise, really. I'm not sure we got Maggie Perry there. Just trying to see if we can. Alright, looks like there's an audio problem. Not on my end. Someone else's problem. Let me just see if we can fix that. Because we just had her like a minute ago while we were testing this out. And now, no audio at all. Huh. That's really, really weird. No audio from Maggie at all. Okay, so yeah, nothing's coming through. Maggie, if you can hear me, nothing's coming through on your end, which is odd. Which is really odd. I'm not sure what's happening there. It's weird. I was literally just speaking to her while we were waiting to go on air. So we're gonna figure that one out. We're gonna continue this coverage, of course. We're never stopping here. I don't know, Maggie, if you want to rejoin the call, maybe that'll work. I'm hoping you can still hear me if you just drop out of the call and rejoin, but I'm not 100% sure what's happening there. This is the magic of live broadcasting news, guys. This is what happens. This is just the reality of it. Bit early in the morning for this, isn't it? Oh, school day too. Back to bed, I reckon. Alright, Maggie, if you can hear me, drop out of the call. And we'll figure this one out. Okay, apparently Maggie can't hear me, which is odd. Because I can hear me. Alright, let's just figure this out. Anyway, if you just join us, let us know your thoughts on this whole Biden drops out thing. Is it a surprise? I'm not surprised. Is it a surprise to you? Let us know. Continuing a lot more statements on this. Kamala Harris says she was honoured to receive Biden's endorsement and intends to earn and win the nomination. She says, and I quote, "On behalf of the American people," so we're just trying to figure out this call sing in the background. She says, "On behalf of the American people, I thank Joe Biden for his extraordinary leadership as President of the United States and for his decades of service to our country. With this this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. So I'm honoured to have the President's nomination. My intention is to earn and win the nomination of the Democrats." Let's see if we can try the Zoom thing again. I'm not sure if Maggie can hear me or not. I'm hearing she can hear me, and we'll take her live in literally just a moment. So Maggie, if you're listening, I am literally just going to put you on live in a moment. Let's hope this doesn't drop out. Maggie, if you can still hear me, give me your thoughts on this. Is this a surprise to you?
I think this is very surprising. I mean, we've been expecting this for a while. There's been a ramp up in talks from his family and a lot of internal sources saying that this was going to happen. It's pretty nice for Kamala Harris that Biden's endorsed her, because I think there was maybe a chance that he wouldn't, but it's pretty expected. I think something interesting to look into is that Obama hasn't actually endorsed Kamala Harris for the presidential nomination, which I don't think really means much for Michelle Obama. I don't really think she would contest either way, but it is something to look into, maybe something to consider.
Down the line, but what else from here then? Because you'd think that a vice president, and there's a few names, and we don't have to go through names, but you'd think it'd probably want to be like a somewhat known governor or something, and ideally for the Democrats, probably just like a white man to try and balance out the ticket, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, presumably Gavin Newsom, I believe, governor of California. But I think there's also a chance that maybe Gretchen Whitmer, who's also a woman, senator, I believe, in Michigan, could be the vice presidential candidate. But I'm not really sure how both of them being women would play out. uh, this is,
An extraordinary ticket like that for sure. Yeah, uh,
yeah,
Governor
yeah.
Whitmer she is. Maggie as well. Just do you think Kamala Harris can win actually though? Because the whole argument from a lot of these Democrats who were calling on Biden to stay in the race is that only he can beat Trump. He's the only one who's done it before. Does she have a shot? Because people, you know, I guess, I mean, her popularity's been somewhat low, but also she's a vice president. She's not that known anyway, relatively speaking.
Yeah, well, I mean, her polling numbers against Trump have actually been not as bad as Biden's recently. I think Biden's been 3% below Trump, while Kamala Harris, she's about 1.5% below him. And of course, these are pretty extraordinary circumstances in favor of Trump, considering the recent assassination attempt. So I think she could definitely beat Trump. Not that it's entirely likely, but I think it's very possible. It'll be interesting to see maybe if she might be able to mobilize certain minority demographics, black voters in certain swing states like Georgia, especially. So that'll be something to look out for.
You are looking at a live shot there of the White House in Washington D.C., where this is all unfolded. Um, Again, really just an extraordinary day. I don't think that can be understated. And we know, Maggie, if we go close at home, and there's always a local angle for these stories. You know, we've had leadership spills close to elections before, but this is you've never seen something like this because he has been cooed, right? If this was our system, we'd say it's a spill. It's just been
Yeah,
it's just been extraordinary.
I I think this was going to happen either way. I mean, with Biden announcing that he wanted to run for re-election, I think there was always a lot of discontent, especially among voters. And the only reason he really won the primaries, in my opinion, was that there wasn't an exactly credible candidate. There was Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, but neither of them were very well known. I think he's only managed to get this far because there hasn't been a uh, particularly notable Democrat to rally around, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Extraordinary morning. We'll keep covering it, of course, throughout the day. And I mean, you've been up all morning covering it. The moment it broke, not doing anything else, I'm sure. While the rest of us were asleep, apart from Wyatt. But yeah, really appreciate your coverage, Maggie Perry, election reporter at Six News. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Maggie Perry there. And we want to bring back in Wyatt Sharp, who we were speaking to earlier, of course, and he has been, covering this again since the moment it broke. He is in Washington. Wyatt, good morning again to you. I just want to see if Wyatt can hear us. All right, can he? White, you able to hear me? Alright, and then we've got White there just now. We'll figure that one out. Alright, we'll see if we can bring... We'll see if we've got White now live. White. Alright, looks like we've got White now. So, White, we are live, just so you're not caught unaware. Again, just pretty extraordinary there. Kamala Harris has obviously just released a statement. She's honoured. And interesting from Obama's statement, he didn't endorse anyone.
Okay, I got you, Leo. I got you.
Alright, looks like we've got White live now. White, you are on the air. Good morning again. Interesting from Obama's statement, I was just saying, he didn't explicitly endorse Harris.
And that's certainly very interesting. Perhaps that speaks, though, to the fact that he has a number of allies within the Democratic Party, and that is not exclusive to Kamala Harris. Look, Kamala Harris right now, the polls that have been kind of tallied over the course of the past few weeks when people were kind of speculating that Joe Biden was not the best candidate to lead the Democratic Party forward into the November 5th general election. There was a lot of primary polls that were being conducted to say, look, hypothetically, if Kamala Harris went up against Donald Trump, if Gavin Newsom went up against Donald Trump, and kind of comparing those two odds, Kamala Harris did not fare as well as some of the other candidates were performing rather in some of those polls. So President Obama, he perhaps is understanding that a lot of people are calling for an open convention. He does not want to endorse somebody like Kamala Harris and then have Gavin Newsom come around and somehow win the Democratic nomination. Of course, all accounts right now suggest that it's somewhat likely that Kamala Harris will be the nominee, but it is still important to note Barack Obama is a fairly diplomatic figure within Democratic politics, so to speak, in the sense of, he is, as many former presidents are, they generally try to stay away from endorsing people in primaries and in different sorts of elections. And I would say President Obama is kind of making that same play here. President Obama, he's been on the campaign trail before with all sorts of governors, including Newsom, including Whitmer. And so if he all of a sudden turns around and endorses Harris, one of them become the nominee, that's going to be a big betrayal. And I will leave with this, Leo, on this point, is that there are a number of issues that people are talking about as it relates to how people are able to win the presidency. In particular, there's a professor, Allan Lichtman. He is a professor at American University. He's correctly predicted 9 out of 10 of the last presidential elections using his 13 keys to the White House that don't have anything to do with opinion. They don't have anything to do with polling. And one of those keys is as it relates to the contest, meaning division within a party. And if someone like President Obama comes out openly endorsed as a candidate, that's only going to lead to division in the party, which is only going to further harm the chances that the Democrats have of being successful come November.
Well, Allan Lichtman also said Biden was staying in the race, so, you win some, you lose some there, hey?
That is true.
He
but
did,
I will
he
give
did,
it to him.
and he
has
was
a
confident
very
about
good
it.
track record. I will say I will give it to him. So let me say in the context of what he was saying for viewers who don't know a lot about him, He is incredibly smart. He's also very partisan in the sense of he is very, very strong Democrat, but he does have the ability to put his predictions aside from his politics in the sense of in 2016, when the pundits suggested Hillary Clinton was going to be successful, he predicted that Donald Trump was going to be successful, one of very few people to do that. So I'm not giving him a ton of credit, but I'm just saying
No,
from the
don't. Yeah,
perspective that he is
yeah.
in right now, I
Don't get
think
me wrong. He's got a really good record, but this is maybe a small stain on that. Yeah, interesting
that
Obama,
is
but
true.
yeah, I just don't see how they could realistically put anyone else in here going against the wishes of the president who dropped out. Right? It just seems far little, too little, too
Well,
late. If this happened maybe in April last year, which is when Biden announced his re-election bid, maybe a different story.
Well, Leo, because there's also the fundraising component, and I'm just fascinated by the fact of how much this is being left out of the conversation. And that is, if the Democrats decide to opt in to get someone like a Gavin Newsom, like a Gretchen Whitmer, all of this fundraising that the Democrats have been able to raise, there's going to be issues with that money in terms of how the Democratic nominee is able to use it. Whereas if Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, because she was actually a part of the Biden-Harris ticket, she simply just inherits all of the fundraising numbers and all of the fundraising money that President Biden was able to do. Of course, this is money that has been raised over the time span of several years. So if all of a sudden a new nominee comes in, the likes of Gavin Newsom, the likes of Gretchen Whitmer, these names that we've been talking about, Josh Shapiro, a really wide range of names here. If one of them comes in, they all of a sudden become the nominee, they're going to have to start out at square one. They're going to have to do in really 2 months what took someone like President Biden several years to be able to do.
Yeah, this is going to be again. The convention's next month, right? And an open convention. I guess obviously you aren't American, but speaking American terms, right? Because for us here in Australia, it's a bit unknown. This would be them voting on it just in that several day convention process, right? Because it's too late for a primary at this point. No chance you can have a full primary. Um, and that in itself would be pretty extraordinary. But it's happened before the open conventions, as I understand it.
Yeah, so if we think back to the Republican National Convention that took place just last week, it really seems like it's been months since then, but in this news cycle, it's only been a few days. Nonetheless, though, if we look at that, that's kind of the best indication just because that's how really people have been tuning in over the course of the past few days here. What happens is the chairperson or the secretary of the Republican Party gets on the stage, and it's the same for the Democrats, but I'm using the Republican analogy. They say the delegates from each state, they go through each state, and each state rather has a certain number of delegates that are assigned based on how primary voters voted in an election. And so in this particular instance for President Biden, he has all of the delegates because he won all of the primary contests. So now it's going to be, okay, where do his delegates go? And with President Biden endorsing someone like Kamala Harris, it's very likely that the majority of his delegates, if not all of them, will go to someone like Kamala Harris. But the Democrats also have something called super delegates, which are completely separate from the regular delegates. And that's where kind of the where the kind of if factor comes in, so to speak, because a lot of Democrats that I'm speaking to privately behind the scenes, they're not willing to admit this publicly yet, they are nervous about Kamala Harris's, the vice president's, chances of defeating President Trump in November, just because President Trump has so much more name recognition. He has so much more kind of ability to get out there than someone like the vice president does, just because
And he's
he's
also
been
got party unity at the
before.
moment.
He has party unity. This is something that the Democrats do not have. We saw at the Republican National Convention from people I was speaking to who were there on the ground, right? I mean, this was one of the most unifying conventions, as one source described it to me, in the history of the Republican Party out of all of the conventions that they had been to. And the Democrats can't say the same right now. I mean, they are likely to lose. Let this sink in for a moment, too. They're likely to lose the 2024 election based solely on the fact that they are fighting amongst themselves. And that makes Democrats very worried because they're going against someone who, as they describe it, is a convicted felon. He's been indicted a bunch of times. They believe it should be extraordinarily easy for the Democratic nominee to defeat President Trump. And all indications suggest right now it's going to be a very steep uphill battle to November 5th, at least if nothing changes, as it seemingly is the case. But today perhaps is the first step in making sure that change can be effected to perhaps reverse the path that the Democrats are on.
Yeah, and of course, logically, while it doesn't obviously apply in terms of delegates and all that, these are people in terms of just supporters, right? And maybe we're getting a bit too online here, but these were people supporting the Biden-Harris administration, and part of that administration is running for re-election, right? It's obviously, stretching it a bit, but it's she's obviously can take credit for anything Biden's done, while she could also distance herself from him personally. She's 59, which makes a big difference in this race, which is all about age. We of course remember Trump is 78 for what it's worth. And really, I mean, where does the attack line come for Trump here? He is used the nickname "Laughing Kamala," which I'm not.
Campaign.
I'm
They
not.
are.
I'm not particularly.
Oh,
It looks like we're just gonna lose White there for a second.
here, I got you. Sorry.
Right,
Yeah.
never mind. Looks no, we still got White. What I was saying, White, is like where does Trump attack from here? Because he's used the nickname "Laughing Kamala," which I mean I'm not sure that's the
Yeah.
best nickname. I don't think the American public hates people laughing. So I guess what does he do here? Because as we mentioned before in the last hour, his immediate statement was just crooked Joe Biden, crooked Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And I don't think that attack line's going to work if you're standing up next to Kamala Harris in a debate.
Let me walk you through this, Leo, to you and to our viewers. Right now, you have the likes of House Speaker Mike Johnson calling on President Biden to resign effective immediately. He wants him to resign right now so that Kamala Harris can assume the presidency. You say, okay, why is that the case? And the reason why is because then President Trump can run against an incumbent. He can run against someone who actually has a record of things that President Trump and the Republicans believe to be bad. So then, for example, on the next debate stage, presuming it happens, rather than President Trump having to say to Kamala Harris, you were a part of an administration that was led by Joe Biden that did some, things that I find to be bad, he can directly say, you did this that was bad. You did X, Y, and Z that made life harder for the American people. And so that's...
And just quickly, I was going to say on the border issue, of course, she's the border czar.
Yeah, and that's one issue. So the border is certainly one issue, and that is one issue where the Republicans can attack her head on because President Biden put her in charge of that issue, and by all accounts, it did not go nearly as successful as it needed to go. So there's that, and then as I was saying, there's the fact that right now Republicans want Joe Biden to go. They want him to resign immediately because they know that if they can run against an incumbent in the way of Kamala Harris, then it's going to be more beneficial to them. But in some ways, it can also be beneficial to the Democrats. Having an incumbent as the nominee is beneficial in some ways. We were talking earlier about Alan Lichtman, and not to keep going on about it, but one of his 13 keys is the incumbency. The incumbency traditionally gives the White House party an advantage, but perhaps given the unique situation and scenario we find ourselves in, this could be an exception to that rule.
Regardless of what happens to the election, of course, Biden is staying on till January. Have we heard any rumors or anything that he would totally resign the presidency? And I mean, first of all, I don't think that's happening. But if there's a health thing, and obviously he's down with COVID at the moment, and then I mean that would make Harris the president. Anything that suggesting that will happen, or would that take pretty much just a major health emergency or something for him to take that larger step and actually drop out? Which again, I don't think is happening, but yeah.
Well, I mean, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of people who certainly want the president to step down. Whether or not he's actually going to do that is extraordinarily unlikely. You saw even just in his statement where he announced that he was withdrawing from the primary, saying that his focus now turns to serving out the remainder of his term. And I mean, let's face it, no matter who the president was, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it was Donald Trump in 2020, these last few months before an election, the president really isn't able to get very much done in terms of legislation. If we think about even just I'm in Washington this week, and if you think about what's happening You have the director of the Secret Service testifying, which is obviously very important, but that's not getting anything from a legislative perspective done in terms of making the lives of the American people better. You have people talking about this story now with President Biden, and it's really all politics without actually a lot of policy type change. So the argument that people are making that, well, President Biden, if he can't run for re-election, he shouldn't be the president, it's really irrelevant to some degree right now, just based off of that in these final months before an election, obviously with some exceptions, if there's some sort of national emergency or something, there really is it's hard to see a world in which the president would have to make a drastic decision in these few months before an election that was not already accounted for. All because keep in mind, the entire administration, they plan out their agenda. They say, okay, we have 4 years. This is what we need to get done. They don't want to do the most consequential things before an election because they want to have time to run on them. They've been in this campaign since, for the past many months now. They wanted to be able to run on some of those issues. And so nothing meaningful is actually happening right now, is I guess what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, nothing ever happens. Maybe, I don't know, why doesn't he just step down to like December or something, just for laughs? Make Kamala the 47th. Trump will have to throw out all that merch. Now, in all seriousness, you're right. It's so close to Inauguration Day for whoever. It would just, again, pending a major emergency, I can't see why they would even think about doing it. Vice presidents, we talked about them last hour. I think I was just looking at some names here, and I'm not familiar with all of them, obviously, but obviously there's Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker, or Andy Beshear. And again, as we spoke before, I'd lean towards it being Shapiro or Beshear. Beshear, of course, he's in...
Let me just mention quickly, Leo, those are all governors, and I think if I heard all the names correctly, they are all white male governors with the exception of Gretchen Whitmer, which I find very interesting.
And Pete Buttigieg, who, of course, is the transport sec.
Right, yeah. Oh, yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
But I just find it interesting because it is playing into this theme that you hear people wanting to get away of identity politics, so to speak, which is not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it's just saying that unfortunately in the American political system right now, it's as if they almost feel, at least from the way it appears, as if they cannot have two women on the ticket for whatever reason, or as if they need to kind of separate it in some way. And that's frankly, I think just a lot of people look back at the 2016 election and they were looking at why people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. And I think even some Democrats say that part of the reason is simply because they didn't believe the country was ready for the first female president. I do think it's a different story, though, this time around, and perhaps it'll change.
Yeah, 2016 feels like a lifetime ago. Of course, you can argue Hillary lost for other reasons, including awful campaigning and ignoring the Midwest. But
right.
We could do a whole another thing just on 2016, just on.
Yeah, but 2016, just saying quickly, it was a former Secretary of State, a former senator, a former First Lady going against a businessman from New York who had nothing going for him other than the fact that he was a celebrity, and Hillary Clinton lost in a landslide. So it's perhaps that's just an argument to be made about the American people really don't look at political experience. Maybe they were tired of career politicians, and so that's kind of why I'm looking at what's happening here right now, and I'm well, who knows what could happen, because they were saying in 2016, it's going to be a landslide for Secretary Clinton. Of course, the complete opposite happened. Right now, it's nobody even seems to know what's going to happen, which is, I think, the really interesting part. Some people say, now that the Democrats have Kamala Harris, it's going to be a much easier time for them. And then, of course, there's the people on the Trump campaign who say that their internal polling shows that they're way ahead. They even expanded their map recently to include states like New Mexico and Minnesota. I mean, those are hardcore blue Democratic states, particularly New Mexico. I don't even think in this century New Mexico has went to, and don't quote me on that, but I don't even think states like New Mexico have went to a Republican president in modern American history, or a Republican candidate, just because
the only time would be 1984 when Reagan won all but Minnesota. That would be
right.
That would be the only time, and again, 84 feels like a lifetime ago. Again, we can talk about 2016. I mean, I don't obviously Trump underestimating Harris, similar kind of to how the Hillary Clinton campaign underestimated Trump in some regard. That's their own risk. Andy Beshear is really interesting because he is governor of Kentucky. I believe his dad was the governor before that. And that is a red state. That is a ridiculously red state. He's a Democrat. He won re-election
Yeah.
as governor, and he's doing that, facing the same kind of messaging and issues that a lot of other Democrats are facing. And so that would be interesting. I'm not obviously suggesting he'd be able to pick up Kentucky, but really, it would be a pick in, I guess, appealing to maybe Republican voters, because that's what you have to do in Kentucky as a Democrat. You have to get Republicans on side, and he has done that effectively. And I believe he was only re-elected last year, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, let me just mention this, Leo. I just got a text from a Democratic source with another possible name for vice president, saying he's a senatorial Democratic source, saying that one name that that he is hearing being floated around amongst some Senate Democrat circles is Mark Kelly, who's a Democratic senator from the state of Arizona, relatively unknown. He was an astronaut. So I mean, there's a lot of people, but certainly it's not necessarily just like you go back to, again, I hate to go back to 2016 again, but Mike Pence. Nobody thought that Donald Trump was going to pick the no name recognition governor of Indiana, who nobody had ever heard of. And of course he did. And so I think you have to have kind of a certain degree of skepticism. And in this case, I think it could potentially be someone like Mark Kelly or someone similar.
Yeah, we all know what happened to Pence. Um, yeah, it would be really interesting to see how that plays out. But again, just an extraordinary thing. Is there any other things? Sorry, I was just going to say we were just going to have a look at some statements there, but I'll leave you there. Wyatt, for the moment, our North American correspondent, you've been doing a great job this morning, and we will keep coming back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you from Washington all this week.
Yes, absolutely. What great timing is in Washington this week. Fantastic timing. Just like really good for us. So I was just sort of mentioning there, just re-looking at some of these statements. If you're just joining us, 6:53 in the morning, we're approaching 7 a.m. On Australia's east coast, and Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. He says, quote, "It has been the greatest honour of my life to serve as your president, and while it's been my intention to see re-election, I believe it is the best interest of my party and, more importantly, the country, for me to," well, he didn't say more importantly, it's just me, "in the best interest of my country, for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me re-elected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris." He didn't explicitly endorse her in that statement. He did later, though. He's endorsed Harris, just to be clear. Yeah, what a morning. What a morning. Just an extraordinary moment in American politics, in global politics. We'd love to get your reaction. Keep it coming through to us. But yeah, Joe Biden is done as the Democratic nominee, and he will, well, pending some huge change in direction, he will no longer be president January 2021. No re-election bid for him. So yeah, Kamala Harris will almost certainly be the Democratic nominee. I know that some have endorsed an open convention, but Biden's endorsed Harris, and that should pretty much seal it up. Not that it wasn't already likely. But yeah, a huge morning, huge morning, and we're going to keep covering all of this for you. Forgive me for being a little tired. I didn't expect to be getting up so early today. Really, yeah, it's a big morning, hey? This is what 6 News does the best. You're looking at that live shot of Washington DC White House. We will stay with that. Joe Biden dropping out of the US presidential race, endorsing Kamala Harris. Huge momentous day. Just an extraordinary moment in politics. We're going to keep covering it for you. Stay with us. Approaching 7 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. You are watching 6 News. Keep leaving your thoughts in the live chat. We'll be reading out those comments live. Have a good morning, and we'll stay with you. I'm not going anywhere. Hopefully not going to school, but I'll do some negotiating, and we'll see what happens there. Stay with us.